Good evening, everybody. My name is Gugulethu Mahlangu, and I'll be your host for tonight's amazing Farm Spaces. Please do forgive my voice. I do have a cold. I hope I'm audible to everyone. So now, without any further ado, let me allow our speakers to introduce themselves and just tell us what they do, and we'll take it from there. All right, Dr. Ndombela, please introduce yourself.
My name is Fiso Ndombela is my surname. I work for the National Agricultural Marketing Council, which is the body that provides advisory services to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Specifically, my work revolves around trade policy as well as the economic modeling and planning of the agriculture and agro-processing sector. Just a bit to give you a sense what the NMC is all about. We really do three main functions. First of all, because we are established under the legislation of the Marketing of Agricultural Product Act of 1996. And there's three things mainly we do. The first and the most important one, we provide administrative services to commodity associations such as your Citrus Growers Association, Hot Grow, and a majority of them, there are 22 in total in the country. And mostly there we assist them with the issues of statutory levies, and I'm sure Justin will touch maybe some of those areas. Also records and returns, which are basically assist the industries to collect the information and to be able to provide the services that they provide to your members. The second part of it, we also administer what we call agricultural trust, which are really funds that were ring-fenced during the transition phase from the control board era, which was the regulated era, into the era that we have now today, which is more of market principles. The third area which I've touched on is around providing the research and providing evidence-based policy decision and policy advisory to the ministers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ndombela, for a wonderful introduction. Mr. Justin Chadwick, over to you. Kindly just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
I'm Justin Chadwick. I'm the CEO of the Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa. The association represents citrus farmers in South Africa, Eswatini, and Zimbabwe. Our major activities are around research. So 65% funds are used for research and technology development. And we have a company called Citrus Research International that does that work. The second area of focus is transformation. We have a CGA Grow Development Company that concentrates on development of growers. And then we have a Citrus Academy that does training and human capital development. The other areas of focus are logistics in terms of trying to ensure an efficient logistics supply chain from the farm to the port and through the port, and then information and intelligence.
Thank you so much, Mr. Justin Chadwick, so much to our speakers for that lovely introduction. And now I'm just going to dive straight into it. As farmers, what should we be looking out for when it comes to exporting? Should we be striving to export our fresh produce? And if so, how does one start the process of export? And maybe Mr. Ndombela, you can answer this one.
Perhaps maybe it will assist to break down effect. To be specific, maybe what we mean by the fresh produce, as the fresh produce in the South African context will include your vegetables, will include your fruits, and to the large extent, if you read the broader definition, you could also include your floriculture. And the three sort of, both if you're looking at it from the biological science of the product and the markets and the production practices that are practiced by different farmers, it entails different ones. Perhaps maybe to start off with the fruit, which is the most prominent, and I think one of the most successful export products driven by our farmers, ranging from citrus, subtropical and stuff. I think one of the key things that one will, if I were to advise as a farmer, either the farmer that is entering into the space or a farmer that is been into that space but want to expand. I think for me, one of the key things I would say, it's really important to start being, before you even get into whether you want to operate in the export market or domestic market, it's always the most advisable decision to become a member of the commodity associations. So if you have interest in your stone fruit, you become a member of that related association. So the reason I say that, because you automatically have access to probably the most latest, efficient, and most market-ready information, whether you're looking at the production, the type of cultivar you'll have to plant, the production standards that you'll have to follow, as well as the different registration components that you have to follow. The second one, to then become compliant with the markets, such as those that within agriculture being registered as your producer code. Then the second thing for me, once you become a member, which most of these things I'm talking about usually become part of your services provided by this commodity association, is to start understanding the market that you want to supply, so that you understand before you even put the cultivar on the ground, you have an end picture in mind of what type of the market we're looking for, what type of the consumer preferences they're looking for in terms of taste preference, because that tend to determine what type of product you'll be able to do that. That's what I would say in terms of the fruit industry, because they operate more into the deep sea market. And I think Justin can even give you a breakdown with some of the example in the citrus industries. They do that work pretty well. If you're looking for the vegetables, it's a totally different ball game if you're looking at the vegetables. It's more of a commodity if you look at the export market, where our regional markets are better positioned and they actually have more returns into our farmers. But then there it's understanding, because it's a totally different supply chain and the cold chain that you'll have to follow if you're looking into all these different markets. And through your local retailers, such as your ShopRite and Tiger Brands, but also through our fresh produce market, which some of our agents already operate and have strong linkages with the likes of your Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, as you go up north. And they are able to link you properly with the channels that you have to follow, and understanding the complications of the logistical chain that you have to follow, but also understanding how your product will be moving on the ground into those markets. So that's how I will look between the fruits and the vegetables and starting to look in terms of the market. But with vegetable itself, you have your vegetable forum and other very specific commodity groups, like as your potato, which are relatively well established, and they can be able to assist you as a farmer. As a new farmer or as a farm that is already in place, one of the key things you can empower yourself with as you get into the export market is access to information, and information that is accurate. And the best place, in my view, for that is to be a member of the Commodity Association.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntombela, for that. Mr. Justin Chadwick, please further elaborate, because Dr. Ntombela said something very interesting, that the fruit markets are doing very well, and we see it with our citrus as well. So as the CEO of CGA, explain why maybe the fruit department is doing as good as it is.
I'd agree with everything that Sifiso said before. The reason why the fruit markets are really doing well are a number of reasons. One is we've been in the game for a long time. So if you're looking at citrus, we started exporting citrus in 1906. So we've got 15 years of experience in exporting of citrus fruit. But if you go back to apples, they were even before that. They were in the late 1890s. So you can imagine that over all those years, the experience that's been built up in the industry as to how to send the right fruit into the right market at the right time, that's been developed over that time. The real reason why we've managed to stay in markets for 115 years and grow the industries is really based on research. If you are selling a fresh produce of any sort, the one thing that you have to do is abide by what is called the phytosanitary requirements of the country that you're sending your product to. And phytosanitary basically means your pest and disease status of your export consignment that you're sending overseas. In order to ensure that a country will receive your fruit, you have to convince them that you're not going to send any pests and diseases with your fruit, or if you do have pests and diseases associated with your fruit, that they are mitigated, the risk mitigated. In other words, those pests or diseases cannot be transmitted with the fruit and established in the other country. So probably 70% of our research is pest and disease management research and research to mitigate the risk. Just as an example, all of our fruit that goes to China has to go through what's called cold treatment. The fruit is sent at a very low shipping temperature, and the reason for that is to kill false coding moth, because the false coding moth don't survive a certain temperature for a certain amount of time. We ship at those temperatures for that time. So it's a very complex arrangement, and I must agree with Sifiso, if you're going to get into the export game, make sure you get really good partners in with you. Choose good agents. If you're new in the game, get mentored by somebody who's been in the industry for a while. If you're in the citrus industry, there is the CGA Grow Development Company. They have extension specialists that can help you with the technical side, because it's very complex technically to get everything right, to get the quality right, and to get the pest and disease management right. So use those tools that are at your disposal.
Thank you much for that, Mr. Justin, for elaborating for us. I just also wanted to maybe expand more on, when you look at your countries such as Mexico and Peru, they're doing very well in avocados and berries. Is South Africa not diversifying enough? Because we hear how successful citrus is. Are there opportunities for us to be looking at such produce? Mr. Ntombela, maybe you can answer this one.
I think in terms of diversification, South Africa is probably ranked better out of most of the Southern Hemisphere producers. South Africa is a member of a certain body called the Southern Hemisphere Fresh Produce Exporters Forum, which basically include your Mexico's, your Chile, and others. And I think if you're looking at countries like, for example, Peru, which were far below as South Africa about 10 or 15 years ago now are really competing in terms of size when it comes to table grapes. Or you're looking at other countries for that matter in the Southern Hemisphere, specializing in certain product given their climatic conditions. And that's probably one of the beauty about South Africa because of very diverse climate. If you're looking from our west coast part towards the inland and eastern coast and towards the northern part of our country, such as the Northern Cape, we have a very diverse climate, some of it being winter rainfall, some of it being summer rainfall. And that allows us to really produce a widespread produce, whether you're looking at fruits or vegetables. Now, coming to the industries themselves, the specific one, I think I would say we are relatively well diverse. Whether you're looking within the citrus, I think we produce more than 4 different types of citrus fruits. But even under subtropical industry, we produce a variety of fruits ranging from your avocados, mango, and lychee. Even under deciduous, we very much spread across. Even if you're looking at your exotic, you mentioned the berries, but I will even go on with other exotic fruits such as your figs and others, which we produce relatively well and we export. Perhaps citrus is usually the dominant one because we have become the second biggest exporter in terms of volumes in the world. So we have sort of commanded that first place in the table in terms of the ranking. But I think we're relatively well off. And now it all depends on the strategies of the different commodities, but it also depends on the market at the time, global market, as we operate in that space. What basically are the forces of supply and demand that the countries are pushing more volumes and which are countries that are putting more. But also the strategies that are employed by different industries. Some of them are starting to replace some of the varieties and focusing really on the niche, high-yielding cultivars to satisfy a certain need. So basically those strategies of which one is more dominant and which one is having more opportunities, it's all depending on the market, but it also depends on the strategies that is adopted by the individual industry bodies as they service their members and as they advise their members where to look for. But in terms of the spread of the commodities that we can produce in the country, depending where you are in the country, we relatively have a very good spread of different commodities.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntombela. Mr. Chadwick, please maybe explain to us more about the citrus industry when it comes to compliance. What does maybe a small-scale grower need in order to be able to export their citrus? And is it something that a small-scale grower can aspire to, or are we looking at more commercial farms that can be dealing with exports?
Unfortunately, with phytosanitary issues, it doesn't matter what scale you are, you still need to comply. So, if a person's got 1 hectare with 1,000 trees, they have to comply with the requirement as just the same as a person with more. So it does make it very difficult because compliance is incredibly administratively intensive. You've got to fill out a whole lot of forms. You've got to register all your production units. You've got to register your orchards. You've got to keep all your spraying. You've got to keep records of your trapping of insects, etc. And all of that has to go into files, and then the files have to be uploaded to Department of Agriculture. They check that you meet the different risk management systems. So it is really intensive, but I'm not saying that small-scale growers can't export. I would say there's a certain size below which it just wouldn't be affordable to do all the administration. But, we've got a lot of growers of small scale that are exporting. I'm talking about growers with, say, 15, 20 hectares who are exporting. I would say if you go below that sort of 15 hectare mark, then as I say, the administration that's required really will make it difficult for you to break even with exporting into some markets. So let's remember that not all markets are phytosanitary markets. So in other words, there are some markets that don't require these requirements. Countries that don't have a domestic citrus industry, so they don't have to protect the industry against, or they don't have an industry to protect against any pest and diseases. So for example, the Middle East, if we export to the Middle East, and most of our Middle Eastern volumes go to Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, you don't need any requirements in terms of phytosanitary for that. You just need certain food safety regulations complied with. That's around your products you can spray. That's fairly easy to comply with. So it just depends which markets. If you're going to the EU or China or South Korea or any of those protocol markets, then one has to abide by fairly stringent compliance requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. And maybe we could also speak more about the free trade agreement, especially with places like China. What are your thoughts on that?
In terms of China, we don't actually have any free trade agreements. So the only countries that we have an agreement with are the EU in terms of the Economic Partnership Agreement, which allows us lower duties into European Union. I must say, we as a citrus industry are a bit disappointed about BRICS and that it hasn't given us any advantage as a citrus sector in terms of China or India. And in fact, we see other Southern Hemisphere countries getting more advantage. Australia's got an agreement with China where tariffs go down to almost zero. And so we pay those duties. And so our fruit therefore becomes more expensive. Also, there have been some relaxation of certain requirements in India for Australia, and those haven't been allowed to us, although we requested them many, many years. In terms of free trade agreements, Chile, Peru, Uruguay, Australia, and etc. have got multiple free trade agreements in countries in the East, and we've got none. The only one that's been discussed is India, but that's been going on for 10 or 15 years. So it is something that we are engaging government on, and it does put us at a huge competitive disadvantage.
Thank you so much for shedding some light on that. And I guess it goes into my next question then, that should we be looking outside of home? Can we export in African countries? If so, how's the market looking like with regards to that? Maybe Mr. Ntombela, you could maybe shed some light on that one.
I think every market always presents an opportunity. And when we're looking at the different markets, you must understand it, having a better understanding of how that market operates on the grassroots level. I thought it was important also to just expand on the point that Justin has made around the trade agreements and how we are sort of on the back foot as compared to other Southern Hemisphere competitors, especially to the Asian markets, perhaps maybe in Europe, because we do have the EPA agreement in place and to a certain extent AGOA in the US. When we do get into the trade agreements part, it's important that also that you do not only consider agriculture, but you also consider other sectors, which really makes the process a very delicate and a difficult one to agree, because you have to be able to first assess what are your sensitive sectors against the trade partner that you want and against the interest and the requirements or the demands that our trading partner want. And one of the challenges which has always been the case in South Africa is that we are trying to go through the reindustrialization process of rebuilding our agro-processing capacity, both in agriculture, in the mining, as well as other industries. And when we look into most of our trade Asian markets, are the countries that has a vast majority in terms of comparative and competitive advantages into those markets, which makes it much more difficult, especially in finding a balance of how do you start protecting your interest, both of agriculture and those that are the manufacturing. But we're hoping that we will be able to break that deadlock and be able to assist and support those trade agreements that we so desperately require to expand our markets. Speaking of that, I think it's important to also be able to, I think Justin mentioned something very important earlier on in terms of your size and in terms of looking at the cost of entering into the export market against at your organic growth, whether it will make sense in terms of those compliance costs that you have to put in to get into the export market, or perhaps you can see the local and the regional markets up until you are at the level where your economies of scale justify investing in such costs to participate in the international market. That is very important to consider, and that will have to go business by business, because you've got unique cases as you understand your businesses very well. But even in the local market, there's still very much good demand and good opportunity, especially for the new entrants players, as well as those that are still small and medium in scale, don't have the capacity. And I think not only looking at the retail space, and because some of these retail space even have a very good supply and development program that tends to also support and subsidize some of the compliance that you might need to be able to access the market. So it's also important that you leverage on some of the support, not only from the government side, but some of the support that is provided by the private industries to ensure that it really uplifts and they develop some of the new entrants into the value chain to participate them. And some of them are already linked with their regional value chain. So you automatically not only having access into the domestic market within the borders of South Africa, but you automatically times have already access into your SACU market and to the large extent to the SADC market. So I think it is important also to look at what are the market players, such as those that are in the processing and sort of that are in the regional, sort of at a retail space. What type of programs over and above just giving you, this is our compliance sheet if you want to supply with us. But what type of developmental programs that they have in place which can be able to assist you to comply with them? And most of the times you find that in terms of cost side, looking into your economies of scale, it might be beneficial to start being part of that value chain while you're developing the necessary competency, the necessary skill set and the resource base to be able to export into the export market. So regional and domestic market at times, depending on the product that you are selecting, tends to offer also at a certain time better opportunities than in the export market. But of course, in general, in some of the very high value product, export market is always, in most cases, is always a best option to be operating on that one. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntombela. And, you touched on something that I want to also expand on. Sometimes we as farmers, we feel like we have the skill, we know what we're doing. We just maybe don't have the money to expand in such a way that can make us commercial in the next 10 years. So what maybe are your thoughts or advice, Mr. Chadwick, on farmers coming together and deciding that they're going to export as a group? Has that been successful in your industry?
To a certain extent. Definitely economies of scale play a role. So if you do come together as a group and therefore get a bit more mass volume, you can, that can help. I mean, the citrus industry was actually built on cooperatives. When we had the regulated area, it was called the cooperative exchange, the citrus cooperative exchange, and all growers were grouped into cooperatives. So that was the basis on which the industry was built. And definitely, if you can join with your neighboring farmers and in that way form a pool and have more product and therefore have more weight in the market, that can definitely help. But obviously, one has to make sure that your neighbor is doing the right things as well, because if you are in a pool and your neighbor has got fruit that perhaps is good quality, then your fruit will be impacted. Likewise, if the neighbor doesn't carry out the pest and disease management correctly, then could be impacted as well. So while it's very good to be in a group like that, some sort of a cooperative type arrangement, one just needs to make sure that you get in with others that are of the same caliber as you in terms of quality and managing the pests and diseases on the farm. So definitely there's a lot of scope for that.
And what are the risks and the gains for a group of farmers or an individual when it comes to exporting? Basically, the advantages and disadvantages, the risks that you can incur, massive gains that are there in the export industry.
The gains are that you become a more significant player in the market. Importers, buyers really want to get a lot of product from as few sellers as possible. They don't want to have to go and deal with a multitude of people. So if you've got a group together and bigger parcel to export, then that's definitely a benefit. Also not only on the selling side, but on the buying side, if you can buy your cartons together or you can buy your chemicals together, that also helps, because buying in bulk also brings the cost down normally. Disadvantage I was mentioning that if, let's say, there are 5 growers in a group and one of them is lax in terms of how he manages the pests and diseases on the farm, if you get an intercept overseas, then unfortunately that whole consignment is impacted by that interception. Often the fruit has to be then shipped to another market at great cost, etc. And you really don't want to be in a group where one of the members in that group is lax in terms of how they farm. So you just need to make sure that you're in with the right group and don't have that sort of risk attached to exporting product in a group.
Thank you so much, Mr. Justin Chadwick. And I have a question for you both. Is it true that the rule of thumb is that wherever ShopRite is, go there with your exports?
I don't know about that. I'm sure ShopRite can help you. Definitely, in terms of Africa, going into Africa, I guess you're alluding to. And if I can just add, Sifiso had that question earlier. What he said was true. Every market we can get is a good market. But exporting up into Africa has got huge challenges, and they're going to have to be sorted out before significant trade takes place between South Africa and the rest of Africa in terms of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Justin, for that one. I'll be sure to definitely ask ShopRite about that. Mr. Ntombela, I have another question for you. So now we're speaking about exporting into Africa and the challenges that may arise. I know we're speaking about the fresh produce industry, but can we also maybe diversify and think out of the box and look into taking our expertise and maybe technology into Africa and kind of developing that system or becoming like an accelerator program per se?
I was just laughing about the statement you make about ShopRite, and I'm thinking if we had colleagues here from Nigeria and Benin with their experience in ShopRite, if they will agree with your statement that much. But nevertheless, maybe in other countries lower down in the continent, it might be true. I really like your question around the diversification and thinking of outside the established routes. And we have to maintain and expand the established routes. I think it's also very important to diversify our product offerings. You don't know that South Africa is one of the biggest exporter of processed products, and including fresh produce such as fruit juice or dried, including also semi-processed and cold and frozen vegetables. So that on its own also offers some of the opportunities in terms of value addition into the product that you produce before you let them leave your borders in the country. And I think especially taking into account the issues of logistics and the issues of border post and other delays around exporting into the African continent, it's probably a better idea in terms of the medium to long term to look at value addition of your product as you export them into the African continent. I wanted to just give an example on what Justin was talking about in terms of some of the delays and how it can impact the value. It really deteriorates your value while it's waiting on the border post. If you were to be sending a container of fresh produce into any other countries within the SADC, let's take Angola, for example, you are not looking at anything less than $2 per kilometers that you have to pay for in your ordinary rivers. If you're using your cold river containers, you're looking at $2.8. And these were the figures that we calculated them around 2019, 2020. So the figures might be even higher today. So that just shows you the cost of logistics if you move this product across the continent. Secondly, you need not less than 54 signatures on the documentation to transfer the container. So this ranges from your phytosanitary, this ranges from your route of origin, this ranges from your compliance with the varieties and all other documentation that you need, but also misalignment of those because they use different system of trade facilitation across the continent. So that just compound the cost of export into some of our neighboring countries as well as the rest of our beautiful continent. But that has made, it might be in the short term a logistical constraint, but we're hoping that with the SADC having put the infrastructure program of about $460 billion, we will be able to be unlocked as we go forward. You also spoke on the issues, which I like it very much as well, of not only when you look at the region, you only look at it as an export destination, but you also look at it as a potential partner for investment. Whether you form partnership in terms of into those areas or you form regional value chains. Justin did mention that they're not only representing farmers in South Africa, but they're also representing farmers in Swatini and other countries. And I think because South Africa is fortunate in terms of infrastructure as compared to other countries, you could be able to link those regional value chains that can then link into export while you have exported your technology in terms of forming the investment into other countries and forming really these good regional value chains, which will not only see South Africa being uplifted, but will see the entire region being uplifted, because that's what we want to see. With a much developing African continent in the region, we stand a better chance of having a more stable part of it. So that, for me, that investment partnership, it's as critically important as we identify export opportunities into our African neighbors.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntombela. Mr. Justin Chadwick, as small-scale farmers, I think we really want to know where the opportunities are when it comes to CGA and what CGA can provide, and also in terms of exports. What is it that we need to be looking at?
I mentioned earlier the CGA Grower Development Company. Their whole focus is on assisting small-scale growers in the industry. So they've got a number of experts on their employment. Firstly, they've got extension specialists, because as you'll have picked up, growing citrus is very technical. And, when you start, you need to make sure that you get the right trees. And for that, we do certify all nurseries. So you'll be sure that if you buy from a certified nursery, that you'll be getting a tree that's true to type and disease-free. But then your expert needs to help you with the layout. And even before that, to determine that your area is actually suitable for citrus. As Sifiso mentioned, we've got 4 different categories of citrus: lemons, grapefruit, oranges, and soft citrus. So, you must just determine which of those your area is most suitable for, and the extension specialists will help in terms of that. Then we have business analysts or business specialists, which will help you with the business plans. We've already done on the existing citrus farms is to assist with business plans. The business plans are also bankable business plans, so that you can raise some money with those business plans to ensure that you've got production capital to see you through the production period. So I think that's another really important point, is that in any tree crop, whether it be citrus or apples or pears or whatever, one of the big challenges is that you will plant your product in year 1. You will start harvesting export grade fruit from that hectare in year 5. So in other words, from year 1 to year 5, there's absolutely no income coming off that land, and you'll have built up more debt over those 5 years, which you will then need to pay back, and that'll take you through to about year 10 before you actually break even and start seeing returns. So it's a seriously long-term investment and a long game. And so to go in with a lot of debt is really, really difficult, because you've got to service that debt, and you only start getting income in after year 5. So I'm not trying to dissuade people from going into the fruit industry, but just be aware of these challenges so that you can address them and know what you're going in for. So that's what the Grower Development Company does, really, is those 2 aspects. But they also will tie the grower up with the mentorship in terms of finding a mentor that will assist around those issues. The Citrus Academy assists with training and short courses. The Citrus Research International has citrus production manuals that anybody can go onto the website and download, etc. So there's a huge amount of material that's available for any grower that wants to look at this industry. If you look at www.cri.co.za, that's Citrus Research International's website, There you'll pick up a lot of information. Anybody's welcome to drop me a mail and I'll direct you to the right person to assist. And my email address is justchad@iafrica.com.
Thank you so much, Mr. Justin Chadwick, for that. I think we are encouraged to know that there is support for us should we choose the route to export. So listeners, please do not feel like you are alone. We have facilities and channels that can really develop you as an export farmer. I just wanted to know about the policies that are there that farmers need to be aware of when it comes to access to export markets. What are the current developing policies to make sure that it's a smooth sailing process for South African and African farmers?
The country doesn't have a lot of legislation that govern around that. If you do understand your registration policies, which is really governed around your agricultural produce standards so that you can compliant and you have those PUC, and then the Marketing Act, which really link you into these commodity groups as well as the exporters. Also understanding which countries we have trade policy in terms of our tariffs, so what tariff you'll be facing, and then as well as the SPS and the TPT issues. I think what is more important is the regulations that are in place, such as those protocols that are governing pest, as Justin has been talking about, and other areas of regulation that you have to be in compliant with, and making sure that you have all the right documentation in place, and also the auditing that you have to do to be compliant with this market standard. So I think the regulation and the auditing that comes with the compliance process is probably one of the key things that a farmer has to be very much aware of. In terms of policies, South Africa allows any farmer or any producer to either produce him or herself into any country that he wants to select to, or through an export agent, which is probably a much less risky route to take than going directly yourself. And they are able to link you with even your export creditors as well as insurances to ensure that your risk profile is mitigated. But key is really understanding the regulation. And that boils down back into really spending time in selecting the right product and investing in knowledge and perfecting the production of that product. Because only then you can have a better rate of survival into the export market. If you have understand is that you are dealing with a biological asset, that you have to understand its biology, the science behind it, but also the technicalities of growing it to the perfection that it appeals to the consumer and that the consumer feels just to pay the price that you are looking at. But over and above that, being an exporter also make you not only to be perfect in what you do within your farm in terms of producing a product and making sure you understand the cold chain into the harbors, but it also make you to understand because you are not exposed into the international markets or the international dynamics of those markets have to be in place. So how the exchange rate operate, because in one season you are doing well because the exchange rate is on your favor. On the other season, the exchange rate is on the other side, which tend to affect it. Those are just different factors and around the policies that I think a farmer has to be really formulate a very good background and understanding of how they fit in to get into the export value chain and where to look for information if you want to really be informed about it. And some of the agricultural offices, not only just the Commodity Association, but agricultural offices, in some of them that really have good information that can be able to advise you correctly and direct you into the right position.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntombela. My second last question is, Mr. Justin Chadwick, thank you so much for telling us where we can reach you, but also any tips and tricks and just valuable information that you guys can maybe share with us so that if we are open to getting into the export market that we are aware of and we can become successful. Mr. Justin Chadwick.
The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development's website is really good for looking up the different markets and what the requirements are in different markets. So if you go into that website, I can't remember what it is, but it's probably www.dalrrd.gov.za. But if you just look up Department of Agriculture, you'll find their website, and then look up plant health. I think it would be under plant health. You'll just have to go through a few different sections to get to where they talk about the export markets and what the requirements are. Because, as I mentioned earlier, some markets are very easy. They're open markets. Others are very complex. So it's important that you know what the requirements are in the different markets before you start production, because different markets require different quality of fruit as well. One area where you can go and have a look, and then also have a look at the CGA website, www.cga.co.za. And I mentioned the CRI website. So I think, all of those have got information that you can utilize. But the most important thing is to have good quality fruit. So make sure that you're planting in an area that's going to give you good quality fruit, and then make sure that you can abide by the pest and disease requirements and understand what they are and what you need to apply, etc., to make sure your fruit is acceptable.
Thank you so much, Mr. Justin Chadwick, for that wonderful advice. I think we missed that altogether to ensure that you actually have good quality to export before you think about anything else. So thank you so much for that reminder. Dr. Ntombela, any tricks, any tips that you would like to impart with us?
I think in terms of adding on the website over and above the citrus one as well as the department one, I think Justin, you got it right in terms of the dawrt.gov.za. Is also the fruit SA, which over and above just citrus other fruits that are there. And then they have nice links there where if you have an interest either in table grapes or in stone fruit, it takes you into the stone fruit website or into the table grapes one. So those are the a website that you've got to have them at your disposal. But also on the vegetable forum, and they have a variety of commodities, whether it's tomatoes or cabbages or potatoes, which you can link you in that. As a trick, and I think for me, as the most important tip I can give or advice, if you can forget everything I said today, I call it a social capital. You've got to be able to find someone in the space. It could be another smallholder farmer. It could be a commercial farmer. And when I mean a commercial farmer, I don't necessarily mean a large, established, wide commercial farmers, because you can be a smallholder farmer but operating in terms of commercial. But you've got to be able to look up at someone who have walked this and those that have experience and be able to establish a working relationship with that. Because once you have established that social capital, not only you have access into someone who can help you synthesize the information that will be harvesting, but you also have an opportunity to observe how it's actually done ethical. And that for me, I think it's a best lesson that you can be able to invest in your business if you can invest in formulating that social capital for your business in the export space. You would have done justice into all other investment that you will be making into your farm or into your firm or any other enterprises that you do. So lastly, develop that social capital.
Thank you, Dr. Ntombela, for that one. We do have a speaker from Millifresh. Millifresh, how are you?
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Gugu. We've got a few questions that we'd like, to ask for our farmers. Basically, Millifresh is a brand, quite a number of farmers, that come together from our cohort that we host in Gauteng. So just a few questions that I would like to ask our speakers. What are the few key things that, if you're considering, put your produce to European countries specifically, what are the few things very key things that you need to, to master? Maybe if they can give us maybe 2 or 3 things that, if you're considering exporting to European countries, what are those few things that, needs to be taken into consideration around that?
Thank you so much, Millifresh. Speakers, would you like to answer our question?
Maybe I can take a part, maybe synthesize from what we've been saying all along. I think for me, it's whether you're going to Europe or, as the speaker said from Millifresh, have a correct quality product, be able to be in compliant with market standards, and keep your records, because the auditors and all that will have to audit your firm to be in compliant with that market will rely at the quality of your records that you keep into your firm. So quality product, market standards, and record keeping, I think falls as amongst the 3 critical things that you have to look after.
Thank you so much, Millifresh, and I really hope that does answer your question. Dr. Ntombela, where can we reach you if maybe we would like to take this conversation further?
I work for the NAMC, so my email address is fiso@namc.co.za. You can be able to reach me there. But also here on Twitter, you can be able to send me some of the messages or on my timeline, and then I can assist you as much as I can. Our website is www.namc.co.za.
Thank you so much, speakers. Mr. Justin Chadwick, thank you so much for joining us today. We really learned a lot, and I think we got the basics. And once we get the basics, we can only go from the top from there. Dr. Ntombela, thank you also so much for being here, for teaching us a lot. And so our listeners, I hope you guys have the 101 when it comes to exporting fresh produce. It's a big market. The support is there. We can do it, basically. It is not impossible. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined us. And now we have come to the end of our evening. Speakers, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chair, and good luck to everybody on the line. I'm sure you'll make a success of whatever you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Justin Chadwick.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Thank you for this wonderful session, your chat. And thank you very much to everyone who have attended. Stay safe, and I hope you all well and all the best with your businesses.
Thank you so much, speakers. And to everyone, good night.